So one of the questions that I get asked a lot by people is, what are the blue ocean books? Where is the blue ocean? And I've been very hesitant to identify any books that I consider to be blue ocean. And there are lots of reasons for that, but I've been very hesitant. But what I've decided to do is to create a video in which I try to identify a couple of books that I believe are blue ocean books. And what I'm going to do is to provide you with some rationale and some context for why I believe that these books are blue ocean. If you are curious as to what is on my list, stay tuned for the video. Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. As you heard in that intro, I am going to identify a couple of blue ocean books for you. And I want to provide a little bit of context for what the blue ocean and red ocean are, and then I want to give a little bit of setup to how this video is actually going to flow. So for those that don't know, the red ocean is essentially the bloody waters of competition, right? That's the analogy that we're using here. And that in that environment where competition is fierce, you have a lot of people that are fighting over a limited number of opportunities. And in translating that to the comic book world, when you hear about a hot spec book, the book you've got to pick up, and you might not even know why you need to pick it up, but it's the book that everyone is talking about. Everyone's running to the local comic shop to try to pick it up, or they're going to the dollar bins to find it so that they can score big. Those are essentially the red waters, the red ocean, when prices are going up, when there's a lot of excitement, a lot of hype around something. The blue ocean, on the other hand, are basically It's basically what the red ocean isn't, right? It is all of those other books that are out there that no one is talking about, that videos aren't being made about, that there's no speculation, there's no hype, there's no movies, there's no nothing around these books. They are just really good books, right? At the end of the day, that's what they're about. The blue ocean is also potentially a book that was once red ocean that has now become blue ocean because no one's paying attention to it again. And so that is kind of how we're carving out the red ocean versus the blue ocean. A lot of hype, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, red ocean. Calmer waters, fewer people like talking about these books, to maybe no one talking about these books, but they still represent really awesome comics. Red ocean, blue ocean. Hopefully that helps. And again, there is a longer video here on the channel where I actually talk about this in much more detail, but I wanted to at least set that up. So in this video, what I'm going to do is to identify a couple of books that I think are blue ocean. Really solid books that people aren't necessarily talking about, but books that I think are really good. So I'm going to highlight those books, the rationale behind why I think that these are good books, and then we'll also talk about the values associated with these comics. And if I can, I will identify a specific grade that I think is like a sweet spot, if there is one. All right, with that said, I want to jump into the very first book. So the first book that we are going to talk about is G.I. Joe #1. And this is one of those comics that takes me right back to my childhood because I was a big G.I. Joe fan back in the day. I honestly didn't even know it was a comic book until much later. But G.I. Joe is quintessential to my childhood, let me tell you that. This book, I think, is a pretty solid pickup right now. And I say that for several different reasons, which I'll highlight for you. They are in the process of making a Snake Eyes movie right now, Snake Eyes Origin. And there are a couple of books around Snake Eyes that I think will potentially go up in value because of that movie. But in my head, this Snake Eyes Origin movie is potentially a setup to them rebooting this entire franchise. And I say that because Snake Eyes is arguably one of the more popular characters out there. But this origin movie that they're making about him is a prequel to all of the G.I. Joe movies that have been made thus far. In my head, if this Snake Eyes movie comes out and it is really well done, and it is popular and it does well in the box office, I think that that would give them the motivation to restart the entire G.I. Joe franchise. And so we have seen consistently the impact that a good movie or TV show could have on a comic. If this Snake Eyes movie does well, I think it actually opens the door to a lot of potential. I've watched all of the previous G.I. Joe movies. They haven't been great. They haven't been terrible. But I think that if this new Snake Eyes movie is done right, it will unleash the potential of what could come from this specific franchise. Now, when you look specifically at G.I. Joe #1, the great thing about this book is that it has a lot of those first appearances of a lot of characters across the entire franchise, including Snake Eyes and Hawk and Baroness and Scarlet and also Cobra Commander. So if Snake Eyes comes out and it's really, really well done and it opens the potential, G.I. Joe #1 is a great book because a lot of the characters that they're going to be building the future movies around, have their first appearance in G.I. Joe #1. And so that's why I feel that this could be a solid book to actually pick up. Now, when we start talking about the values associated with G.I. Joe #1, I can tell you that the 9.8 is incredibly expensive and has been expensive for quite some time. 9.8 right now has an FMV of $775, which again is pretty high. But here's the thing. When you actually look at the sales data on Go Collect, you can see that this book is actually selling for closer to $1,000 than it is its actual FMV, or the fair market value, at $775. And when you dig into the data even further, basically what we see is that the sales are somewhere between $800 and $1,000. And so that's a lot of money to spend. And so I don't really advise people go after the 9.8 unless you have a nice chunk of change that you can put here. You may want to look at a different grade. And specifically when you start to look at the 9.6, this might actually be a better buy because there is a dramatic fall off in the asking prices. The FMV of a 9.6 is only $210. And when you look at the actual sales data, the sales are hovering somewhere between $230 and $240. So again, 9.6 might be a much better and safer way to go. And a 9.6 is honestly not a bad grade for any comic. When we take it a step further, the 9.4 is actually selling for around $200 against an FMV of $160, which again is not bad. A 9.4 is honestly a respectable grade of this book. The 9.6, fantastic grade. 9.8, fantastic, but the prices are a little out of whack for me. So the next book that I'm going to highlight also comes from the 80s, just like the last book. This one is Secret Wars from 1984, and this is a fantastic comic. I will tell you that. And it's fantastic in my opinion because of that awesome cover. The cover that features so many of the popular Marvel characters jammed right there into one view. That's what I think makes this book really special when you just look at it. But when you go a little bit deeper and you look into the history of it, this title actually has some historical significance. Secret Wars was the very first large crossover event that Marvel had ever done. So the book has some historical significance associated with it. Now, why do I think that this book has some true potential? I think that it has potential partly because of the history, but also because of the belief that the MCU may do Secret Wars at some point. And we certainly don't know whether that's going to happen or not, but the potential is there for them to have this large crossover event that brings together so many popular characters. And we saw that with what they did with Avengers and with the historical significance of Secret Wars and with all of the different Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and all of those characters kind of woven in there, there is some potential for them to do a major event like Secret Wars. And I would salute them if they decided to go down this path. But this is one of those books that I think is starting to kind of come into its own. It is what happens in this series it's not the best story. Let's be completely honest. It's not the best story. But some of the things that transpire, like around Spider-Man with his black costume, we are still feeling the ramifications of that to this day, if you think about it, because the black costume essentially started here, right? And we see how that is playing out with Venom and Carnage, and no, it still has some ramifications to this very day. So just a really awesome book, really awesome series. This issue number 1 also represents the cameo appearance of the Beyonder. And I am of the belief that at some point, the MCU is going to go cosmic. And I've had this belief for the last almost 3 years. And so if that happens, then there may be an opportunity for the Beyonder to also have a presence in the MCU. And that could be a little bit of a long shot, but you never know what could happen. So unlike the first book that we talked about, this book is not incredibly expensive. And I think that it is an affordable book for people to be able to pick up, even at a 9.8. When you look at the fair market value associated with Secret Wars issue number 1, at a 9.8, you see that it has an FMV of around $250. And when you start to look at some of the other grades, there is also a sharp drop off as you go to the 9.6. The 9.6 can actually be purchased for slightly above FMV. And at the moment, a 9.6 has an FMV of only $95. And the most recent sales, I think I looked at the most 5 recent sales at a 9.6, and the average was around $113. So again, not a crazy amount of money when you're looking at the 9.8 or the 9.6. When you look at a 9.4, you can see that the value drops even more at a 9.4 and certainly for those grades below. For this specific book, again, I would recommend that you consider the 9.8, but a 9.6 is also not a bad way to go. There is also the strong possibility that you have this book in your collection already, or that you could potentially find this book inexpensively at a local comic shop or possibly even online. Again, this book sold incredibly well back in the day, which means that there are a lot of copies out there. So you have an ability to be rather choosy if you decide to pick up a raw copy and submit it in to actually get graded. You have a pretty good chance of finding a really awesome high-grade raw copy. So there you have it. In this video, I wanted to take an opportunity to identify a couple of blue ocean books for you, and books that I think are pretty awesome that have some potential associated with them. And again, I tried to outline my rationale for some of this. I would ask you to, again, to kind of consider, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Are there things that you would add to the rationale? I'm definitely going to be interested in hearing what folks' thoughts are around the 2 books that I have identified. And again, this is not about telling people to go out and buy these books. I want to say that one more time. But I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, I want to encourage you to hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment behind, so we can mix it up in the comment section. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.